you're in a new space. Who were really the powerful people? Was it the director of CIA? Was it FBI? Was it the big pharma? Was it military-industrial complex guys that are General Dynamics? Who were the people that are like, oh, I got you. I never thought you had power. Who actually has
power?
The
most powerful person by far, the president. Power over everybody. Power. The power is enormous.
Most people don't believe that.
It is. But there is a sort of a deep state. And a lot of that's people that have been there. And then there's some bad guys, there's some bad people. Then there's a radical left, which I think are more dangerous in many ways than the other countries. I really do. You know, guys like Shifty Adam Schiff and other people, they're bad people. They're sort of sick people, not stupid people either, by the way. Smart
of course,
people.
Sure.
But they're vicious, but they're very bad for our country.
Is Adam Schiff powerful?
Can you imagine? Well, he made up the Russia hoax.
No,
he and Hillary.
What I'm saying is, who is their boss? Who calls them and say, you better or else?
I think it's an amorphous group. It's a group. It's not one person. It's an amorphous group of lunatics. And when they come together, they're pretty bad.
本频道目前最大的一个坑终于要被填起来啦哟！
什么他妈的叫惊喜？这就是惊喜啊
！Hello， 大家好，我是利恩。今天我们要继续谈美国的深层政府下集。那上集里头，透过 Johnny Harris 带我们做的深入研究分析呢，发现到从1945年二战结束，美苏之间冷战开始以来，一直到1963年美国总统约翰甘乃迪被刺杀，这背后都脱离不了美国政府最无法撼动的最大的情报组织，也就是中央情报局 CIA 这个单位。特别在苏联都已经解散了 KGB。他们的情报组织之后呢 ，CIA 俨然已经变成全世界最大的情报单位，掌握全世界的秘密，可以说是集所有的资讯、情报于一身。那我们要先对深层政府有一个理解哈，就是深层政府应该怎么定义？简单讲，能够代表美国政府的，只有透过美国政党政治民选出来的总统所掌握的白宫，也就是联邦政府这边呢。才能够称之为美国政府，对吧？那深层政府就是连白宫都无法轻易的去影响或者是掌控的政府里头的反动势力，而这个反动势力呢，未必一定是跟明面上的美国政府，也就是白宫，一定是作对的，不一定。好，但是呢，它并不轻易的受控于美国政府。当然，在很大的程度上，美国政府的权力是最大的，这是毋庸置疑的，也是我们刚刚从川普的访谈当中所听到的。但是，川普在第一任的任期2016年到2020年，他自己后来也承认说，他那个时候没有想到很多的事情，并不如他所以为的容易控制。更不要讲，很多时候你连要控制什么你都不知道，包含我们现在所看到的，好比说美国国际开发署 USA 的支出啊，等等等等。都不晓得这些背后隐藏的支出是怎么出现的。那现在就要回过头来讲，就是如果我们现在先从 CIA 作为一个美国深层政府最大比重的核心单位，那么第二个问题就是 CIA 它背后所驱动它的一定不外乎就是利益嘛，因为只有美国白宫联邦政府才可以说是真正代表美国全体老百姓的利益。好，当然实际有没有做到是另外一回事，可是至少它是明面上美国所选出来代表美国国家利益的主人。那深层政府也是靠利益驱动的话，我们就要从另外一个角度去理解，就是 CIA 它单方面光是靠情报，那能够得到最大的利益要从什么方面产生呢？没有错哈，很多观众可能心里已经有了答案，那就是战争。CIA 所掌握的情报，其实最大能够从这里面获得的好处的利益，就是战争，甚至是透过假讯息的方式来挑起两国之间的战争。所以 CIA 它在美国深层政府里头 ，CIA 最大的一个 partner， 也是我们今天节目要特别深入来谈的，就是美国军工复合体。那讲到这个美国军工复合体，我们要怎么样去看穿这个美国军工复合体跟 CIA 合作的本质呢？就必须要先透过两个著名的美国总统的相同背景说起，一个就是我们已知的2016年到2020年的唐纳川普，还有一个就是1963年被刺杀的美国总统约翰甘乃迪。为什么会这样呢？因为这两个总统身上有高度惊人的相似性，而最奇妙就是在美国历史上，约翰甘乃迪跟唐纳川普都是最公开发表对于美国有影子政府或者说深层政府这样的概念的两位总统，所以我们接下来就要一起来看看这两位反战的总统是怎么样为我们打开另一扇窗户， 看到美国军工复合体与 CIA 一起共谋利益的事实真相吧。Let's go！要知道啊，川普呢已经遭遇过2回刺杀了。最危险且举世皆知的就是2024年7月13日，川普在宾夕法尼亚州竞选集会上遭遇的刺杀了。一名枪手呢在会场外围的屋顶上使用 AR 步枪向演讲台射击，击中了川普的右耳，现场有1名观众死亡，2名观众重伤。真的就差那么一点点，川普就成了下一个肯尼迪。而且很巧合的是呢，后来根据调查显示，这名枪手在行刺川普之前，曾在电脑上搜索过约翰·肯尼迪遭遇刺杀的细节。那么还有一次遇刺呢，就是在2024年9月15日，距离上一次刺杀仅仅过去了2个月。川普在福州的高尔夫俱乐部打球时，疑似遭遇了一次企图刺杀。有一名嫌疑人手持一支装有瞄准镜的 AK-47 步枪，藏身于高尔夫球场之中。但是还未射击呢，就被特勤人员发现。特勤人员朝着嫌疑人连开了4枪，但是都未能命中。嫌疑人仓皇逃跑，不过呢，最终还是落网被抓。川普在事后接受社媒采访时，一个劲儿地夸赞特勤局做得很好，确实比起上次来说呢，进步很大，因为没有任何人受伤。但是这连续不断的刺杀搁谁都会寝食难安吧？一次不行，再来一次。仿佛只要川普不死，刺杀行动就不会结束一样。那么为什么川普会和当年的肯尼迪家族一样，遭遇如此频繁的刺杀呢？不夸张的说川普和肯尼迪当年的境况高度相似。川普和肯尼迪呢，都大力反对战争，不同意让美国军人去为别的国家那些破事儿流血牺牲。反战呢，是每一个普通百姓都乐于看到的事情。但是有一个群体却对反战深恶痛绝。哪个群体呢？军工复合体。小肯尼迪曾经公开说过呢，他伯伯就是因为反对越战而被刺杀的。60年代初呢，越南战争旷日持久，把美国的经济拖入了泥潭中。战事如果再继续下去必然会对美国社会造成动荡。所以肯尼迪呢，曾极力主张减少美国在越南的军事介入，甚至有撤回美军的计划，把越南的问题从军事解决变成为靠外交解决，逐步减少在越战上的投入，让2大阵营回到谈判桌上。但是这一主张与军工复合体的利益背道而驰，不打仗了还怎么卖军火呢？仅仅美国军方公布的数字，从1965年到1973年，这短短的8年时间，军事支出的费用就有1347亿美元。要知道在70年代以前呢，1美元就能换1克黄金，那搁现在相当于每年烧上了上万亿美元的军费。而越南战争真正持续时间还远不止官方记载的这8年，如此夸张的收益获利者怎么能轻易罢手呢？所以紧接着肯尼迪就被刺杀了。之后美军大量征兵越南，军工复合体赚得盆满钵满。那么军工复合体到底是什么呢？军工复合体这个概念指的可不只是军火商。军火商呢只是其中的核心之一，它主要是以军工企业加上军方再加上国会这3者为核心，以及一众外围组织所形成的利益集团。这个铁三角的运行逻辑呢是这样的，大家一起推动战争或者军事冲突，由军方制定战略计划，推高国防预算，国会呢批准拨款给军工企业，军工企业研发武器，再批发给军方，最后通过个人回扣和政治现金等方式返还给政府雇员和国会议员们。军工复合体的概念呢，最早是由艾森豪威尔在1961年的总统告别演讲中提出来的。他认为有一股贪婪的力量正在渐渐主宰政府的决策，将民主和自由置于危险当中。而且不止艾森豪威尔有这种感觉，他的前任杜鲁门呢也曾经回忆到，在冷战的时期，每当和苏联要达成谅解时，就会有某些糟糕的事情发生，来阻碍双方关系的缓和。苏美双方的对峙就这么诡异地持续了将近半个世纪。时至如今呢，这股贪婪的力量已经演变成了吃不饱的饕餮，尤其是在拜登任职期间，他的国务卿布林肯被这股力量贴上了骗子的标签。自加沙战争开打以来呢，布林肯被拜登派往中东调停12次。在布林肯的主持下呢，加沙停火谈判从埃及开罗到卡塔尔多哈，再到法国巴黎、意大利罗马，进行了无数次的调停。每次呢，以色列和加沙快要达成协议的时候，一些糟糕的事情就会发生，来阻碍双方协议的达成。似乎总有一股神秘的力量来阻止这个世界走上和平。美国呢，有太多军工企业靠着战争起死回生，甚至大发横财。比如说呢，伊拉克战争时期，波音公司的客机由于事故率高发，商用订单锐减，濒临破产边缘，但是通过卖战斗机，亏损被抹去了大半。雷神公司呢，更是扭亏为盈，洛克希德马丁股价再创新高。 根据瑞典斯德哥尔摩国际和平研究所统计，全球25大武器制造商2019年的销售额是3610亿美元，但美国就占了 61%。政府内部呢，有太多的人与军工企业深度绑定，甚至还玩出了一种凯旋门制度，政府雇员离职了就可以去军工企业工作，而军工企业领导层离职了就可以去国防部担任高级职务。比如说呢，小布什副总统理查德·切尼，他的老婆呢曾经是洛克希德·马丁公司副总裁兼董事，前美国国防部拉姆斯菲尔德也曾任民办智库南德公司的理事长，前任国防部长劳埃德·奥斯汀2016年退役后去了雷神公司担任董事会成员，2020年又回到五角大楼当了国防部长。这些人呢，在政府部门和军工企业之间来回横跳，你说是为了啥？不打仗能行吗？大家靠什么吃饭？可以说啊，谁反战，谁就是军工联盟的敌人。而川普呢，在没选上第二任总统之前，就反反复复的标榜自己是美国历史上唯一没有发动战争的总统，只要他上任，就会一切以美国优先，减少海外军事介入，不再当财大气粗的榜一大哥，会要求北约自行承担军费，并计划结束对乌克兰经济的援助，不再管俄乌战争那些破事。如今川普呢已经上任了，如果上任期间完全兑现诺言，那么军工企业的订单啊确实会大大减少。所以啊，就很有理由怀疑军工复合体内部对于反战的总统达成处决的命令。那我接下来要放一段影片，是小劳勃·肯尼迪，也就是被暗杀的约翰·甘乃迪总统的侄子，也是现任美国卫生部长。他在2023年7月的时候就上过了 Patrick Bet-David 的 Podcast 节目，就清楚揭露了时任美国总统甘乃迪呢是怎么样的被美国军方在古巴危机这个事情上去要挟强迫，并且不得不进一步妥协。这个幕后军方的策划也是 CIA 的情报头子。肯尼迪之后就下定决心，一定要好好的来整顿 CIA 的这个深层政府的结构，但这也开启了肯尼迪被暗杀的命运。我们一起来看。
When 3 days before my uncle took office, the outgoing president, President Eisenhower, gave what I think we should today regard as the most important speech in American history, where he warned Americans against the domination, this emerging military-industrial complex that would turn us into an imperium abroad and a national security state at home and destroy our role as the world's exemplary democracy. And he had been the commander-in-chief in World War II, so his words were very important. And then my uncle, I was on my birthday in 1960, January 17, 61. My uncle takes office 3 days later, and then his 1,000 days in office are just a constant fistfight with the military-industrial complex to keep the country out of war. They kept trying to trick him into war. They did it at the Bay of Pigs 3 months in. They tell him, you got to send these guys over. And he said, I'm not using the military to invade a country. And, I don't like communism. I don't like Castro. But the Cubans have to make their own determination about what kind of government they're going to have. The U.S. can't go into all these other countries and change governments around. And he said, I don't want the U.S. military involved. And I don't think we should be involved in any part of it. And they said, don't worry. We'll use United Fruit Company boats to get the men there. And he said, I'm not giving air cover. I just want you to know that. They said, don't you worry, you won't need it. And he said, why? Castro has 200,000 soldiers in the best intelligence agencies. And why do you think 2,000 men are going to be able to win this battle? And they said, because we have the whole thing wired and rigged. And there's going to be a big uprising in Cuba, and it's all done. This is what Alan Dulles told him. Richard Bissell, Charles Cabela was the military general of the CIA. He suspected that, but he couldn't believe they just lying to him. And when those men were dying on the beach, and they were telling, now you got to send in air cover, you got to send in the Essex, the aircraft carrier. He said, I'm not. And he realized he'd been tricked, and they thought a young president would, cave in to avoid humiliation. It was the lowest point of my uncle's presidency that those men were dying because of his bad decision. And he took the blame publicly, but privately he said, I want to take the CIA and shatter it into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds.
好， 这边我补充说明一下，当时时任美国总统约翰肯尼迪他政治生涯以来的一个最大危机，也就是猪猡湾事件 The Bay of Pigs。 那因为那时候肯尼迪很年轻坦白讲 CIA 跟美国的军工复合体根本就已经不把肯尼迪当一回事，他们就骗肯尼迪说，我们派2000人去入这个猪湾提龙滩这边，进入古巴之后呢，我们就可以来推翻掉那个时候古巴的共产主义，也就是鼎鼎有名的卡斯楚，向这个卡斯楚领导的古巴革命政府发动一次这个政变。那你可以从小奥伯甘乃迪可以听到其实那个时候甘乃迪完全没有意思要这样做，他认为那个尽管是一个共产国家，他也讨厌卡斯楚但是他不认为美国有权利去干涉其他国家的政府。但是呢，甘乃迪还是被迫发动了这个政变，失败，就掀起了一个著名的美国反古巴行动的一次高峰。那甚至后来联合国的安全理事会都有针对美国这一次的进攻是不是合法的讨论。甘乃迪呢就被人称为说他是误信了 CIA 过分乐观的情报，但是呢你可以发现特别就是他并没有要派美军去收拾，他反而是切割，也因此呢对于那个时候才刚刚上任90天的约翰甘乃迪政府的信誉就大减。相反的，这个事件反而促使着卡斯楚的政权在古巴革命当中得到非常大的巩固。也因为这样，所以后来古巴担心美国再次进攻，那古巴就跟苏联开始靠近，最终呢就导致了1962年的古巴飞弹危机。所以呢我们从刚刚小奥伯肯尼迪的描述就可以知道，那个时候真正在决定美国对外发起这种我们讲的美帝主义，其实长期以来是因为深层政府而产生的。你就会发现到为什么美国在过去历史上常常有这种美帝主义干涉他国内政的形象，但是美国又却是一个在国内高度表彰民主自由的国家。所以很多人都觉得这两点看起来很矛盾很冲突。那你现在透过有深层政府这一层的理解之后，你就会发现并不难理解了。好 ，OK， 我们继续看。
And then over the next couple months, he fired Dulles, he fired Cabell, he fired Bissell, and he tried to clean up the agency. And then, they tried to get him to go into Laos. He refused. They called him a traitor for that. They tried to get him to go into Cuba in 61 and again in 62 during the missile crisis, and he wouldn't send it. He wouldn't, go invade. They tried to get him to go in Berlin in 62, and he wouldn't. They tried to get him to go in Vietnam. They said you need 250,000 troops. His closest advisors, people he trusted, like Max Taylor, Averell Harriman, Dean Acheson, they said, if you don't send in 250,000 troops, the Vietnamese government's going to collapse. And he said, it's their government. It can't be our fight. We can help them the way the French helped us during the Revolution, but we cannot fight. This cannot be the American war.
好，那你可能好奇如果在60多年前，约翰甘乃迪那个时期就已经有这么庞大的 CIA 跟美国军工复合体一起合作，这样子的深层政府的形式，连美国总统都管不动。那时至今日，这样子的情况真的还存在吗？那真的时至今日，美国政府都不闻不问，或者说都不知情吗？那这个就要看你从哪个角度去看。因为约翰甘乃迪被刺杀这件事情，当时最大的得益者是谁？其实是美国时任的副总统约翰逊。这个就要大家再去看我们之前做过的甘乃迪世纪大悬案的上集大家就会了解那个时候美国副总统约翰逊，他跟甘乃迪在战争路线上面的南辕北辙。他不但在短短的2个小时就立刻在飞机上直接受命成为总统，更重要的就是一上任之后，他立刻改变了约翰甘乃迪对于反对美国参与越战的态度，变成美国积极的加入越战。这个时候你就慢慢有一个理解，就是小罗伯甘乃迪讲的美国政治其实不过是深层政府的一个表面的舞台，这样的形象就越来越鲜明了。那想当然尔，这里面深层政府控制把持最大的政党其实就是现代的民主党。当然你说共和党有没有得利者？也有，但是民主党这边跟深层政府呢，相对而言它变成是一个长期被把持的傀儡。所以这也是为什么我们之前谈到过说，像 Joe Biden 作为一个民主党的总统，居然连自己的连任他都没有办法自己来决定。说好听一点是被迫因为民调的压力而被党内的人士呢给纷纷要求下台， 但是其实我们都知道 ，Joe Biden 跟贺锦丽啊，早就是深层政府共同决定推派的代表而已，他本身并没有办法为自己决定什么。而唐纳川普作为一个商人，本身并没有这种金钱上面的利诱的关系，就跟甘乃迪家族一样，都是非常有钱的，不需要与深层政府做任何的合作来获得金钱上的利益的时候，像这样子有冲劲、敢为自己独断独行、不受别人摆布或控制这样的总统，其实在美国历史上，从约翰肯尼迪以来就越来越不容易看到了哈。那川普偏偏就是另外一个跟当时的约翰甘乃迪高度相似的总统，这也是为什么我们才会看到唐纳川普在2024年的总统大选分别被暗杀的2次。你就想，这么想要置川普于死地，跟当初这么想要置约翰肯尼迪于死地的人，那不是同一批，还会有谁？还有谁能够更像约翰肯尼迪一样，这样子有撼动深层政府的影响力？好，那你一定会好奇，那如果这样说起来的话，从川普被暗杀事件来看，深层政府的势力似乎一直都在。那现代的美国是否有参与过任何的战争，也涉及到深层政府的操控呢？还真的有。我们就好好的从小劳勃肯尼迪的口中来听听看，现今的美国军工复合体最大操纵者是谁，以及俄乌战争的背后究竟是不是又是一个深层政府所引导的阴谋？我们一起来看。
This is a war that should have never happened. It's a war that Russians tried repeatedly to settle on terms that were very, very beneficial to Ukraine and us. The major thing they wanted was for us to keep NATO out of the Ukraine. The big military contractors want to add new countries to NATO all the time. Why? Because then that country has to conform its military purchases to NATO weapon specifications, which means certain companies, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, General Dynamics, Boeing, and Lockheed, get a trapped market. In March of 2022, we committed $113 billion. Just to give you an example, we could have built a home for almost every homeless person in this country. We then committed another $24 billion since then, 2 months ago, and now President Biden's asking for another $60 billion. But the big expenses are going to come after the war, when we have to rebuild all the things that we destroyed. Mitch McConnell was asked, can we really afford to spend $113 billion to Ukraine? He said, don't worry. It's not really going to Ukraine.
It's going to American defense manufacturers.
So he just admitted it's a money laundering scheme. And who do you think owns every one of those companies? BlackRock. So Tim Scott, during the Republican debate, said, don't worry, it's not a gift to Ukraine, it's a loan. So raise your hand if you think that that loan's ever getting paid back. Yeah, of course it's not. So why do they call it a loan? Because if they call it a loan, they can impose loan conditions. And what are the loan conditions that we impose on? Number one, an extreme austerity program, so that if you're poor in Ukraine, you're going to be poor forever. Number two, most important, Ukraine has to put all of its government-owned assets up for sale to multinational corporations, including all of its agricultural land, the biggest single asset in Europe. In Ukraine, there's been 1,000 years of war fought over that land. It's the richest farmland in the world. It's the breadbasket of Europe. 500,000 kids almost, Ukrainians have died to keep that land as part of Ukraine. They almost certainly didn't know about this loan condition. They've already sold 30% of it. The buyers were DuPont, Cargill, and Monsanto. Who do you think owns all of those companies? Yeah, BlackRock. And then in December, President Biden gave out the contract to rebuild Ukraine. And who do you think got that contract? BlackRock. So they're doing this right in front of us. They don't even care that we know anymore, because they know that they can get away with it. And how do they know that? Because they have a strategy. And that strategy is an old strategy, which is they keep us at war with each other. They keep us hating on each other. They keep the Republicans and Democrats fighting each other, black against white, and all these divisions that they sow.
很多人也说，美国深层政府其实是有一个三角关系，也就是 Cia、军工复合体以及所谓的华尔街金融圈的大佬，或者有一说就是所谓的石油大亨洛克菲勒家族。这个部分呢，我也不否认，但是呢，我认为深层政府呢的主要结构仍然在 Cia 跟美国的军工复合体，那是因为这两个他们所决定参与在这个世界上大大小小发战争军火财呢，是最明显也是最直接，而且呢，这也是比较严重的去影响到了美国政府白宫自己做出来的很多决定。那至于像华尔街的金融圈这一块的话，毕竟美国本来就有不同的利益团体，都会透过政治游说的行动呢，借机能够来影响国会的立法案的通过等等等等。所以我分上下两期，主要详细的跟大家介绍是 Cia 跟美国军工复合体，那是因为我认为这个是在里面的占比最高。好，那当然还有一个部分比较特别的是政治圈的裙带关系，这个有机会我好好来跟大家介绍，特别是反政府主义者索罗斯他所影响的美国许多的政治人物都绑在一起，所谓的家族上的关系的存在。那这个有机会呢，再作为番外篇来跟大家介绍。最后我想特别谈约翰甘乃迪是美国政坛上面第一位天主教总统，他被视为杰出的天主教领袖的几个原因呢，是因为在那个时候他打破了美国社会对于天主教担任总统的一个偏见。很多美国人那个时候都担心天主教的总统呢会受到梵蒂冈教宗的影响，损害国家利益。但是甘乃迪呢，通过公开的演讲以及辩论，明确的表示他的宗教信仰不会影响他的政治决策，成功的赢得了广泛的支持。那更重要的就是他身为一个基督徒的道德观呢，展现出来极度的反战。而如今身为基督徒的美国总统川普，非常有当年甘乃迪的影子，也是一位高度反战的总统。我在之前的一部影片当中，我也强调，就是作为一个基督徒，你不太可能不是一个和平主义者。而你身为一个和平主义者的时候，其实不光是不轻易在战争当中选边站的部分，更重要就是我们透过了这2期的影片可以看到，全世界许多国家大大小小的战争，不是我们一般表面上看到的冲突或仇恨这么简单，有更多的战争，它背后完全无非只是一个利益所驱使的军工产业就需要的生存方式罢了。当人们还在彼此互相检讨谁对谁错的时候，早就已经被军火商背后赚得盆满钵满数钞票。所以这也是为什么我们要格外的小心战争这样的一个行为，它不光是一个国家的问题，它更有可能的是来自于这个庞大的产业利益的需求。而这样的产业利益需求，我认为它对人类的文明与进步没有帮助，反而是拖慢了进步走向。圣经讲到末日的预言的时候，在马太福音也提到，到那时民要攻打民，国要攻打国。所以似乎和平多半都不会维持太久。大家有没有发现，从2战到至今以来，也才进入了短短的不到80年。我们如今呢，又要看到许多包含俄乌战争、包含以哈战争、许多战争局势的冲突的升温，仿佛象征着人类不可避免的又要走入一场战争的洪流当中。所以我们也衷心的期盼，也为川普总统祷告，希望他如同当年的约翰甘乃迪一样，真的能够好好的去打击美国军工复合体这样的一个产业链的结构。当然我个人坦白说，认为这极为困难，但是如同当年有着高度宗教道德操守的甘乃迪一样，又何尝不会再出一个这样子的美国政治人物来尝试突破这样的一个所谓的反人类的产业呢？避免世界走向深层政府再一次的控制。最后在节目结束前我要跟大家分享的呢，就是这一次被美国总统川普新任命的国家情报总监土耳其加巴德，他就在去年2024年的时候就已经接受过 podcast 的访谈来谈论到他认为的美国深层政府的组成成分以及这里面扮演的角色者是谁。那经过我们前面一个脉络介绍之下来呢，大家现在再来听这个土耳其加巴德的这个访谈就会有很清楚的一个理解，也更可以去佐证 就是其实美国的深层政府它越来越不是一个秘密，大家也才充分的意识到一件事情，就是为什么川普这么执意在选前就承诺一定要在当选后公开甘乃迪被刺杀的真相。这个不光是建立一个透明政府的价值，更重要的就是川普也想要透过这一个机密文件的公开呢，让全美国人民都知道他这一次第二任期会有更大的一个要肃清整顿的，就是他想完成约翰甘乃迪那个时候所没有完成的事情。你可以说川普他是一个野心家，你也可以甚至说川普看起来好像是一个一人政党的老大一样，带领的整个共和党全部都跟着他的方向走。但是你不能不说，川普他确实是一个不受人摆布跟控制的独立总统，也恰恰是因为川普今天所展现出来在美国政坛上这样的一个高度的独立性，人民才对他感觉到有信任，才相信川普能够做到许多过去民主党甚至是约翰甘乃迪所做不到的事情。我们这边是超级神队友，我们就下部影片再见，拜拜。
Who actually runs the government in your experience?
Not who you think it is. It's and in many cases, especially recently, the troubling part about all this is it's not even people who we vote for. When you look at what happened when President Biden had that infamous debate with President Trump, it exposed the reality that many of us have known for a long time, which is that President Biden has not been the guy calling the shots. He has not been the guy making the decisions, nor has it been Kamala Harris, for that matter, nor will it be if she is elected president. It is this cabal of, the Democrat elite, the woke warmongers, made up of the likes of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and, Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan and, people who are in the military industrial complex, people who profit from us being in a constant state of war. It is those in the administrative state and the national security state who derive more authorities and ability to take away our liberty when we are in a heightened state of crisis or war. It is their friends and billionaires and people in media who all derive their power from being able to have a figurehead that essentially they can control. And the most troubling part about, there's so many things wrong with this, of course, but really at the most fundamental level, you look at, our country is the oldest democracy in the world, but the reality of a truly functioning and thriving democracy that has brought to life the vision that our founders had for us, that we really have a government of, by, and for the people, and that we have the ability and responsibility, for that matter, to ensure that the government we have only exists with the consent of the governed. That becomes very hard to do, to hold people accountable when the person that you voted for is certainly not the one making the decisions.
How long has that been the case? Was it ever the case that the president ran the country? When was the inflection point?
I don't know that there's one specific. I mean, there has been, as personalities come in and shift here and there, I would say the answer to that has probably changed. But in the election that we are facing here very shortly in the United States, it's our opportunity to hit the reset button. And, however people feel about the choices and the options that we have, and they've changed a little bit recently, but really it's only the faces that have changed. The stakes have not changed. And the choices between the Democrat elite, and I've been saying this for months, like, hey guys, don't, because it's like, oh, is Biden going to stay or is he going to go? And who's they going to replace him? Is it Gavin? Is it all of these different theories? They make for good chatter, I guess, on cable news. But I've been telling people all along, don't be distracted. You take one horse out, you put another horse in, you've got the same people who are running the show. And it is between the Democrat elite, will be Kamala Harris on the ballot, and those calling the shots behind the scenes continuing to remain in power, versus Donald Trump, who has a record of, the reason why they're doing all they can to destroy him is because he won't bend the knee. to this Washington establishment, which is made up of people in both political parties, by the way.
What makes you think that a Trump presidency would be any more inoculated against this nefarious behind-the-scenes control than the one that we have at the moment? Surely you're just, if the people out front don't make any difference because it's people behind the scenes that are changing, then what makes Trump any better than what we've got at the moment?
It's not that anyone who's put out front doesn't make a difference. It is specific to, in this world that we're living in now, specific to President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. And the reason why they've been doing all they can to try to keep Trump off the ballot in over 32 states, all of the court cases and lawsuits and everything that the media is throwing at him, the reason why they're doing that is because you may agree or disagree with his decisions or his policies or the way that he talks about things, but he is not beholden to those same establishment interests that so many of these establishment politicians are. And so, he's not going in and saying, oh gosh, well, I got to do what this person says, or I got to do what that person says. I think oftentimes even his own staff doesn't know what decision he's going to make or what position he'll put forward. And that is, to me, that's the clear choice. You have a choice between those who believe that government knows better for us than we do, that their power is more important than our freedom, that their power in many cases derives from being in a constant state of war that undermines our national security, versus Trump, who has the ability to, and frankly, the backbone to say, yeah, no, I'm not going to go down that road, or we're going to take a different path, or we shouldn't be in unnecessary counterproductive regime change wars. We should focus on investing in our country and try to work towards a future of peace and freedom and prosperity.
If that's correct, if it is the case that this sort of limp, flaccid Democratic Party has permitted people behind the scenes to come and basically run, puppeteer the people that are out front, that's happened very quickly, because it was not that long ago that we had the very guy that you're saying will sanitize this thing in office. So is it going to then take a long time for that to be cleaned up? And also, how do we know that some of this didn't already exist?
It did already exist.
Okay.
It did already exist. Because the party elite itself has been very powerful for a long time. So that hasn't come around very quickly. And, I think one of the problems when President Trump was elected last time was, and he's talked about this himself, he came in and, he'd never worked in Washington before, and he had ended up with a bunch of people around him who were a part of this establishment, this Washington establishment.
Do you think he didn't really have that much of a plan? Do you think it was a surprise to him that he got in some ways?
I don't know for sure, but it certainly seemed that way. Yeah. And it was interesting because the conversations that I'm hearing coming from even establishment Republicans right now, are very similar to the ones that I heard in 2016 when Trump was elected, which was, okay, like, we gotta like balance the scales, in their words, by surrounding Trump with people who hold completely opposing views than he does, to try to mitigate what they view as the quote unquote threat that he poses to not the country.
Who is it that's saying that we need to surround him?
Oh, I mean, it's basically like the neocon warmongers, even within the Republican Party. So,
and what do they see as the position he holds that they're trying to counterbalance?
That he, and he's been pretty vocal about this. Like, he's like, no, we're not going to wage more stupid wars, and we're going to put America first, in his words, and we will achieve that by peace, through strength.
Who wants war and why?
They would be shocked by how many people do. And they won't say, I want war, or I like to see more people dead. Of course, they won't use those words. But there are politicians who are beholden to the big defense contractors who are making billions and trillions of dollars. And they are their political donors and their supporters and their friends. And ultimately, it's those politicians whose knee-jerk reaction to any challenge or situation in the world, instead of choosing diplomacy and seeing war as the last resort once you've exhausted all other means, understanding how costly it is, both in lives and in taxpayer dollars, it's just, hey, we got to go and punish this bad guy, topple this regime, wage this modern day siege through economic sanctions and warfare, all of the tools that they have at their disposal, without thinking through what the cost and consequences of those actions and policies are.
Presumably on the ground and also economically, domestically too.
Both.
It seems, are these people...
And it's, by the way, it's not reflective of, I think, especially over these last 20 plus years, the vast majority of Americans, regardless of political party, are sick and tired of this. So their view is not reflective. They're not just like, oh, well, this is what the quote unquote people want. It is ultimately, it goes back to this kind of cabal of power that they're trying to hold on to.
Do you think that those people, I struggle to find or meet people that are genuinely evil. There's people that have got goals and then they're kind of risky and frivolous en route toward getting those goals. And you think, this is just collateral damage. Who really cares? I'm getting my backhander from Raytheon or whoever the fuck. But it seems surprising to me that someone would think, I want to go to war. So do you think that these people that are pushing for it genuinely believe that it's in the best interests of the country? Have they been able to gaslight themselves, this Stockholm syndrome from whoever is sort of continuing to fund them? Or is it something a little bit more malicious? Are they actually sort of trying to land grab or this sort of odd power game that I imagine it feels powerful for you to be America and for you to have a foothold here and have a foothold there? Have you got any idea what kind of motivates these people?
I think they tell themselves whatever they need to tell themselves to sleep at night. But as someone who's been, I still serve in the Army today. I've been deployed to war zones in different parts of the world, seeing and experiencing firsthand the harsh ugliness and realities of war and the costs. The people who are so quick to go to war and see that as the first response rather than the last, number one, they don't have any excuse. I don't believe everybody should, it's mandatory to serve them. I don't advocate for that. But if you are in a position to make these decisions about war and peace, you need to be very responsible and do your due diligence to actually truly understand what the consequences of those decisions will be.
Might be worth a quick visit to the front lines, maybe.
They do those all the time for photo ops. I saw this while I was deployed, and I've seen a bunch even when I was in Congress for 8 years, where they'll go and they'll do like, we'll stop here in this war zone for 12 hours and hop off the private plane and take some quick photos and wear your flak vest and the helmet for the picture. But it's it's
visually impressive, but realistically unimpressive.
Yeah, it looks really goofy to me, but for them, it tells a good
perhaps pick apart where they are.
I've heard that, like, I've been to Iraq 27 times. It's like, okay, like
the air-conditioned jet wasn't.
And yet, even those who are saying this are some of the very same people who are saying, like, we should just go bomb this country to smithereens. Like, okay, like there's maybe a real big problem that we're dealing with here. But is that really the right answer? Is that the best answer? What happens as the second and third and fourth order of effects after we do what you're proposing? What will the costs and consequences be? Again, in human lives and economy and in all of these other ramifications that a responsible leader should be considering before you go and advocate for such a serious thing.
So it seems like you've got Democratic Party not happy with Trump generally, some factions of the Republican Party not happy with Trump. So it seems like,
and Nikki Haley, just to put a name to Nikki Haley is one of kind of the figureheads of that faction within the Republican Party.
So Nikki Haley is driving forward this neocon,
yeah, very much so,
warmongering.
Yeah.
How come she's still there?
Because there are people with a lot of money who make money from that position or supporting that position. And they see, again, I don't know what they tell themselves to be able to sleep at night and be comfortable with what they're doing. But they have convinced themselves that this is the way things should be.
That's what makes me think that it is self-conviction as opposed to leading this sort of double life where you know that it's wrong and then you go out front, because the level of certainty that you need to be able to step out in front of the camera and we should do this, we need to do that. You go home and you drink yourself into a hole, because there would be, for me, the, just straight up multiple personality disorder that I'd have to go through would break my brain in half. I don't think that
you're a good person.
Well, other people would disagree, but yeah, I know what you mean. Like, it's just.
But it's like, okay, well, I get what you're driving at, and like, okay, well, how do you define someone who was evil or driven by evil intent? I would argue that even if there's not like some Jekyll and Hyde situation going on, I would define that evil intent as someone who cares more about their position, their political position, or their power, or their influence. And I definitely in certain cases, and this is why Kamala Harris would be so dangerous as president, commander in chief, because I have no doubt in my mind she would immediately feel the need to exert strength and to assert her position and prove that she is a truly strong and powerful commander in chief of the United States of America's military. And what better way to do that? What more effective way to do that than to actually use our military and go out and commit an act of war.
So that sort of need to prove yourself makes you quite easy to manipulate in some ways. It makes you fragile.
Yes, especially when you have so many interests. And this is not new. This is, you heard Eisenhower warn about the military-industrial complex and their influence and their cozy relationship with members of Congress. You go back to President John F. Kennedy and his brother Bobby Kennedy, who were battling against even four-star generals and civilians who were beating the war drum, saying, go to war, go to war, go to war. President Kennedy's compelling speech at American University about peace and the hard work that it takes towards peace was the pushback against that. And that doesn't only exist today. It's far more powerful today than even it was back then.
Going back to what you mentioned before, which was the fact that everybody knew behind the scenes, but nobody was talking about out front, which was the declining mental health of Biden.
Yeah.
Just how widespread was that internally, do you think?
I mean, it was impossible to ignore.
But if you compartmentalize him, keep him away, we don't let him out front, that's a cheap fake edit, that's a whatever.
I think that's the challenge, though, is they, even as they did all of that, it wasn't enough to try to hide his both physical and mental decline. I was with him on the debate stage in 2020 when I was running for president, and I've known Joe Biden for a very long time. I was friends with his son, who also served in the Army National Guard. And, people have asked me, like, did you see signs of this back in 2020? It's no. I mean, it was the same Joe Biden that I'd known for many, many years. And I think recently someone did a side-by-side of his performance on the debate stage in 2020 versus now, and how significant that difference is. So even hearing Kamala Harris and the people around him and, Morning Joe on MSNBC say, oh, he's never been sharper and he's in the best form he's ever been in his life. Like, anybody who knows him now and certainly has known him over the years knew that was all crap.
We've all seen those photos of before term and after term. I mean, even
That's
Obama,
who
entered as this sort of vibrant, handsome black guy, and he comes out and you go, that's 2 decades in 8 years. Congratulations.
Full job.
Yep, of course it is.
Every president that served. So obviously, when you're in your late 70s, just imagine the toll.
Ruthless. So this is something about to make one of the most unpopular cases that the internet's going to hear this year. every time that I've seen this sort of commentary around Biden's decline, it's made me feel sad. It's made me feel uncomfortable as I watch this, and for two reasons. First one is the one that everybody kind of agrees with, which is it's an older man who's sort of being forced by this organization to be the tip of the spear when he's evidently not capable of doing it, and blah, blah, blah. But the other side is this is the twilight of his career.
Yeah.
And people remember the thing that you left them with. Mm-hmm. Their lasting impression is often the one that kind of continues through. And, you know, you can make whatever criticisms you want about what he's actually done or said throughout his career. I don't really know that much, but I know the way that people socially interpret signals from others. And to think that you've got this guy, how long has he been? Like 5 decades or something? He's been in it forever.
I think he was the youngest U.S. senator ever elected when he got elected to the U.S. Senate.
Right. And now he's the oldest president ever. Yeah. So this guy's like the parentheses of U.S. government.
Yes.
Right? You know, the alpha and the fucking omega.
Yeah.
And to think, you know, doesn't matter what you say, that was a very, very long career, culminating in you getting to the pinnacle of this, and that being this sort of really awful lingering aftertaste that everybody gets. And I go, that makes me sad. That makes me feel sad for somebody.
I don't think that's unpopular at all. I think it's just, I mean, as humans who have empathy,
not much of that in political discourse.
Sadly not. And that's been, I think that has been one of the sad things that I've seen is, you know, all of the different clips and the footage that's out there that gets replayed over and over and over again. And just the mocking and the ridicule. It is unfortunate that is where today's political discourse has gotten, rather than just recognizing exactly what you've said. Like it is sad to see any person in this state, especially on a global stage. The thing is, I mean, you know, Joe Biden's run for president a few times before he got elected. It's what he's always wanted. This is the pinnacle of what he has always wanted to be, to achieve that title, to be the president of the United States. And so, you know, ultimately, he's the guy who made the decision to run. I have no doubt in my mind that he firmly, even against other people maybe telling him he shouldn't run for re-election, Joe Biden is well known to be a very stubborn man, a very stubborn man. So the fact that he chose to run, he chose to stay, and he chose to run for re-election, you know, I'm sure I know there are people around him who benefited from him staying, but that was his decision.
That's why so few people are going to give him any sympathy for what's happened, because you already know that you're in decline. You already know, and if this is true, if it is the case that he wants to run it, it's not Jill, you know, marionetting.
I'm sure she's got a role to play in it as
marionetting him behind the scenes or whatever. That he is continuing even now, you know, and then you actually get yourself into a much more awful conversation, which is he cognizant of exactly what he's potentially trying to sign himself up for? Like, are we talking about, you know, someone who's really, really detached? I have no idea. But yeah, I mean, what an absolute, the fact that the Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, Jill Biden story makes Trump's reality TV campaign actually just look like one smooth arc between it all. You know, stuff behind the scenes and stories and what's going on in Ukraine, and there's this deal, and there was a backhander and all of these photos, and there was a laptop thing. You know, like, this country is mental. Like, this country's crazy.
And the worst thing, I mean, all of this is deeply troubling, but when you really look at it, who's forgotten along the way in this whole narrative? You know, it's the everyday working man and woman who's struggling to get by. It's, you know, the fact that we have more and more kids graduating from high school functionally illiterate, a failing education system, that you know, open borders and everything that's happening because of that. The real issues that are actually affecting everyday Americans' lives are too often lost, or go unheard. Their voices go unheard because of all of this other stuff.
Yes, we know the cornerstone is Christ alone.